Hey, so this is sort of a part two to the video I made on the Yellowface protest outside the print room in West London. I want to just add a little bit more to this because a number of things have happened since I recorded that video. I have been in dialogue with one of the people who were involved in the protest, and she happens to be um, an actress of stage productions. Um, I don't think she'll mind me mentioning her name because she has a Wikipedia article. She's a somewhat a public figure, Vera Chok, who is of Chinese Malay descent. Again, that's going by the Wikipedia article. Um, I don't want to put too many words in her mouth. We've had quite a lengthy back and forth discussion, which I have to say, she was very civil and polite towards myself. And I'd initially come on a little bit strong insofar as my stance on the issue. I do maintain some of my views, but absolute truth be told, and this is a point where I'm being absolutely candid, I was perhaps a little bit too hasty to judge the situation because there is a little bit more to it. So basically, the background to this is that there is a play at this theatre called In the Depths of Dead Love. This is a stage theatre. It's a play by Howard Barker. Now, the controversy lies in the fact that this story is based on a story, as I understand it, that is set in ancient China. Um, but if the argument of the producers is that this play has a universality, then I think they probably dug themselves in a little bit of a hole by saying that they wanted to adopt a particularly English theme. Now, it's all white actors, and apparently they all were given Chinese character names. Also, East Asian actors weren't even auditioned. So perhaps looking at that, I was a little bit hasty in my judgment. And I guess now I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the nature of the protest because I cannot definitely understand why that was problematic. And I did actually say this to Vera in our discussion. Um, According to what she said, they had actually approached Howard Barker and the theatre to raise the issues that they had, but they weren't interested in dialogue, so that's when the protest occurred. Now, the way this was reported initially was this was a protest against racism at the theatre, and the reason I've been quite hasty in defending it is because I believe that term racism is a very damaging allegation. Um, so I defended the theatre on those grounds. I still think it is quite an inflammatory thing to say, and I'm not sure if it's entirely appropriate here. So I do maintain some of the points I made. But having said that, I think probably I was a little bit hasty in my judgment of the situation, and that's the problem with basing videos solely on news reports because news reports only give. I can't say it was one-sided. I mean, they showed both sides. It's just that it was restricted in what information was there. I don't think the news reports were biased. I think they did show both sides, but incidentally, it should be said that Hard Barker and the theatre have robustly defended their side. They've apologised for discomfort caused, but they deny there was any racist connotations, and they have hit back at the Actors Union Equity over the claims that they're making. Um, so, looking at the situation, I would reconsider the stance I took in the sense that I came on quite strong and said that they were overreacting and it was but now I sort of understand their point of view. Having said that, I do still maintain that there is some contradictory messages coming out from groups like Equity, and I just want to be candid about how I feel about this. And to be honest, I got this from some of my discussion with Vera. And again, I don't want to put words in her mouth. That would be libel. I'm not going to do that. Not going to say she said this or she said that. I have to say she was very reasonable in the exchange that we had. But I do think that there is a general issue of contradictory messages. That is to say that on one hand, there is this complaint that East Asian actors are underrepresented in media. Now, I think the only way to really gauge that is to get, to look at all the productions out there, all the performances, and just work it out by the numbers. Is that representative of how many East Asian actors there are, etc.? I don't really give much credence to sweeping statements. And with the greatest respect, certain East Asian actors do say things like this, like East Asian actors are underrepresented, but I think it helps if you give some sort of actual numbers, actual statistics on, well, where does this allegation of underrepresentation come from? Now, to be fair, Gemma Chan did make a point. She said that between herself and I think it was Burt Kwong in the 1970s or 1980s, there had not been an East Asian British actor in the leading role in any TV drama in that whole time. She was referring to her role in Humans. Humans was last, well, 2015, the first series. Burt Kwong was acting in police, I believe, I forget the name, but there was a police drama set in Liverpool in the 1980s. So that's about 2, 3 decades. So if that really is true, if Gemma Chan is indeed the first actor of East Asian heritage to front the show in that whole time, I would agree that probably is a big underrepresentation. Personally, I have to say I'm against quotas, so I'm against the notion of there has to be an exact proportion of people in this production or whatever. I think that's nonsense because clearly you're going to have. Personally, I think the most important thing for any production is realism. So people are convincing in the role that they are playing. I believe that is more important than anything. I believe it's more important than quotas. But like I say, maybe it came on a bit strong in my initial video, and I somewhat regret that because I was a little bit hasty in my judgment. Um, so to anyone who may have been involved in the protest and responded to that video, well, I can only say I hope you see this video as well, because I was a bit hasty and I somewhat regret that. I do want to challenge one. Like I said, there's contradictory things going on here, and that is an aspect I do maintain, and I do want to challenge it. If on one hand you're saying that East Asian actors are underrepresented, it seems contradictory to me to then complain when East Asian actors do get roles, because if those roles are deemed to be stereotypical, I mean, let's take this production as an example. It's set in ancient China. Now, if there was discrimination at place, and it seems there might have been, if East Asian actors weren't auditioned, that's wrong. And I would certainly agree with the protests in that regard. But if East Asian actors took the role, and then a month later we hear, yet another complaint that East Asian actors are, being patronized to do certain roles just because they're East Asians, well, it's sending out a mixed message because underrepresentation on one hand versus well, we don't want to do these roles because it's stereotypical. I'm not an actor obviously, but I have an Irish accent now. If there was a producer making a play about, let's say, the troubles in Northern Ireland, in all likelihood I would be cast as an IRA terrorist or a UVF terrorist simply because of my accent, or a victim of the troubles, or something to do with the troubles. um the point about acting is it is acting, it is portraying a role, and I think that's, with the greatest respect to Vera and with the greatest respect to those other protesters, I think they're associating this with the real world scenario, that is we are Asian actors, this is the issue going on here. But to the general public, the point is you're actors, you're portraying a role. So I think there's a bit of a problem in, so I think there's a breakdown in communication between the way actors see it, all actors, and how the general public sees it, i.e., someone who has no connection whatsoever with the acting industry. I mean, I don't even live in London. So people might say, well, why are you sticking your nose into it? Okay, the reason I am interested in it is because I'm interested in society generally. And this is a social issue. It then, because when people choose to make it political by making a protest, and I'm not saying that they're wrong for doing that. Like I say, if I was in their shoes, given the context of the situation, maybe I would be protesting as well. So I'm not saying the protest was wrong, but I'm just saying that it is important that you understand how something is perceived. And to the wider public, the perception is that, well, they're just playing the victim. And, I know people might not like me saying that. They might say it's condescending or whatever, but I do think it is problematic if your narrative is always that you're the victim and the white majority keeps you down. Um, to me, that's race baiting, but it doesn't really help to build dialogue because you then make the other side to be the villains. So how can you have dialogue if? And by the way, I'm not saying any individual is doing that. I'm just saying it as a general observation. Um, you know, in the end of the day, in this world, we can never get everything exactly as we want. Every actor struggles, and you don't even need to be involved in the industry to see that. So I do reject this idea that white actors just get roles handed on a plate. Certainly in this specific case, and that's where I was wrong to be hasty in judging this particular situation. But I do maintain my view on the general situation that sometimes there are contradictory messages that no matter what approach is taken, there's going to be complaints. So if actors of East Asian heritage get roles that are deemed to be stereotypical, let's say, for example, their role is playing a Chinese immigrant, or their role is playing a Chinese foreign exchange student, or their role is playing, you know, a, a Chinese character in an ancient Chinese context, all those roles are arguably stereotypical, but if they don't do them, then who does? Because if white actors then take the roles, then it's deemed to be whitewashing. So, you know, I think people would agree that someone has to do the roles. And I think the general public just get a little bit tired of hearing actors always complaining. So from my point of view, they need to be careful not to get into this notion that they are always victims. And that's politically incorrect thing to say, but that is the truth. If you send out the message, I am a victim, and you're going to take issue with every single thing, that's going to be problematic because then the public no longer see you as an entertainer, but frankly, as a complainer. And I think it's also problematic from a point of view that there is a perception that actors live in a bubble. Now, that isn't entirely fair because many actors struggle to get by. Again, you don't need to be in acting to see that. But that, again, is a public perception that actors live in a bubble, and as a group of people, and I mean all actors here, there's a perception that there's, and this is going to be insulting, but prima donnas. So all I would say is, if you want to convey grievance, firstly, it's your democratic right to do that. I mean, protest is absolutely a democratic right. Um, Incidentally, I heard that one of the protesters got spat on. Now that's ridiculous. No one should be subject to physical abuse simply for raising their voice. That's absurd, and it's unfortunate that that took place. I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently one of the male actors who took part in the protest actually got spat on. Now, I really sympathise with anyone who goes through that. That's disgraceful. But all I would say is that if the narrative you're sending out is that everything is about victimhood, that to me is a problematic narrative, especially. And again, this is saying something about someone I quite like. But frankly, Gemma Chan has quite a privileged life. She's a model, she's an actress. She has a very comfortable life. So if she's sending out the message, I'm a victim because I'm East Asian, with the greatest respect to Miss Chan, that isn't going to go down too well with the public. You are a wealthy person. You're in a privileged position. And I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm sure you work very hard. But it comes down to this idea that if you need to understand how the public perceives something. And I'm not saying everyone in the public agrees, but looking at the news reports of this, a lot of people took it the way I took it. Um, and I don't think you can entirely blame the media for that because they did show both sides. I think it's partly because the narrative is we are victims. This is how we feel about the situation. Now, actually, they left a comment or two on their organizing page on Facebook. Um, and I notice a lot of people have replied to my comment. I'm not going to go there because it's only going to end up me versus a lot of people. And, then I'll lose my temper because I'll be misinterpreted. And I don't think it will go anywhere. But I do hope people from the protests maybe see these videos. And just all I would say is, on this specific issue, I accept that I probably was too hasty in my judgment. But in general terms, I don't think you can always sort of say, "Oh, I'm East Asian, therefore I'm a victim." I think that doesn't that doesn't warrant a great deal of respect, because then people just think you're feeling sorry for yourself. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. You know, I don't consider myself mainstream. I'm from Northern Ireland. That's the smallest nation of the United Kingdom. It's the smallest of the four home nations. I grew up in England. People call me a terrorist. So I have experience being an outsider. I might be white, but I have experience being an outsider. So I'm not completely coming from this point of, living in some sort of ivory tower. Far from it. Certainly don't consider myself privileged at this point. I'm not, making out that I'm a victim either, but I'm not privileged. And that's another thing. If you are from a minority group, certainly there would be issues that you would face that other people might not necessarily face. But in this country, there are strict anti-discrimination laws. Now, if it turns out Hard Barker and the producers of this play actually discriminated against East Asian actors, then there might be a case to be had in terms of, I don't know, maybe getting a fine. I can certainly see where some of the issues lay, because their argument was, this is a quintessentially English play, even though it's based on a Chinese script. Okay, if that's the case, why give the characters Chinese names? So I definitely see where some of the issues lay. And I want to make that very clear. I can definitely understand some of the concerns. But my problem is, if you're always sort of presenting yourself as a victim, that that isn't going to go down too well, because people would just say, well, wait a second, you get paid for what you do. What's It's not to say that things are perfect, but the fact is, everyone, most people, I shouldn't say everyone, but most people have some sort of struggle in life. The idea that people are white, they get things on a plate, that's simply not true. I certainly haven't been given things on a plate. So, I've been in menial low paid jobs that I hated. So I do resent the idea that white people are all privileged and all white actors are privileged. I can think of white actors who, have struggled to get by, and who are always typecast in similar roles. Maybe because it's the way they look, maybe it's because of their accent. Um, I think producers, certainly, I think this was an own goal by the print theatre, but hardcore racism, I think that's a little bit of a strong claim. Now, to be fair to Vera, when I had the discussion with her, she agreed that that shouldn't be something that's thrown around. Anyway, I know people are still going to disagree with a lot of things I'm saying here. All I'm saying is, I would ask you to take some of these things on board, because this is the public perception. You can't just go around and say, I'm the victim, you must listen to everything I'm saying, because there is also perception, and that is extremely important. If you certainly, it's up to both sides. I'm not for a second saying, oh, just shut up and stop complaining. I'm not saying, not like that. People should appreciate concerns that you have. But it works both ways, and if your attitude is, I'm the victim, people must always listen to me, well, that's going to look a bit self centered. So, anyway, those are just some things I think people should think about.